Are you a project manager trying to juggle all of the issues happening on your project? You know you need to keep your eye on the prize, and of course, what is that? It's the key priority of your project. I'm going to show you 3 models that project managers can use to keep their eye on the prize and make sure their project is successful. Let me take you through them, tell you how to use them, and I'll even give you a use case with some options of decisions you can make. Coming up next on projectskillmentor.com. Well, hi, I'm Liz, and I am the Project Skills Mentor, and my channel's all about how to help project managers be better at their job. And to do that, I cover more information on my website and give you the tips, tricks, and tools you need to succeed. So let's get started with constraint management and going through those 3 models. Let's start with triple constraint, often known as the project management triangle. This model focuses on scope, time, and cost. These 3 conditions are generally set at the start of the project through the charter and the project plan. And if you want to know more about what a project charter is, how to create a plan, and the corresponding budget, see this video about my Project Manager's Toolkit, and the link below will also guide you to my blog so you can actually download that content for free. You've heard about cost, time, and scope, but if you're new to project management, you might want a refresher. So let's talk about that. What is cost? Cost is the budget, the amount of spend. That can be fixed cost and variable costs. It depends on your project, how much of each of these you have. And you might need to be wary that sometimes fixed costs can change if the scope or timeline changes. Imagine you have rental costs for the space you're using. Well, if your project goes longer, you're going to need to renegotiate that lease and then have higher costs. Another thing you're going to need to look at is the timeline. Understanding that this isn't just calendar days of work, but also the total effort taken. And the third element is scope. Now, scope can be tricky because essentially it's naming what you will do, the scope of the functionality or features of the solution and product. But scope can also be the flip side, what you won't do. Now, theoretically, that's a pretty long list. The way you deal with it, though, is if there's something on the edge, something that says, we will handle this kind of customer, then you might want to say, we won't handle that kind of customer. Or we will have 13 pages that have these elements, but these other elements which could relate won't be in scope for the first version at least. So you've got the definitions now, but the question is, how does triple constraint help you? Well, it helps you understand which aspects of the project are a priority. So are you driven by cost, time, or scope? And it helps you understand the levers you can push between those 3 things when you do have a change. This point can be really helpful when you're dealing with change control and your client. Helping your client understand the prioritization that you're creating through this change will help them understand if it's really important enough to do. Project managers should always consider these questions. What's the most important aspect of the project? Is there a contingency that you've put into the project planning that you can use to manage this change? And are there resources that you can flex to mitigate the risk of the change happening to the project? These 3 constraints are dynamic throughout the life of the project. Documenting your decisions and results will help you be sure you can track what you've decided and show that your project planning has adapted to those changing circumstances. And by that I mean, if you have a change in scope, you'll also need to change your budget and your corresponding timeline, at least to some level. However, in recent years, this triple constraint theory has been assessed as maybe being oversimplified. So we're going to look at a few more in a minute. But first, let's talk about triple constraint as a case study. Total calendar time is fixed, but scope increases. What kinds of things can a project manager do to keep the project on track? You might try one of the following things. A, you might add staff to increase the amount of effort you can put in toward that change. B, you may reduce scope in another way, and it can be that the scope you're increasing may have a knock-on effect to scope you can decrease. Now let's talk about a second model, the client-centric constraint model. This model focuses on clients' needs and wants as the most significant part of the project. You may find this model useful when the client is trying to determine what they're building. Maybe they're building for their customer, in which case their project needs to flex to their customer's needs. The goal of every project should be to meet the client's needs. That's obvious. But One of the jobs of a project manager is to protect the project from influences that undermine its ability to be successful. And every time one of these changes happen, the project manager needs to replan, recast the plan of that project charter, the schedule, staffing, and budget. So how do they make these adjustments while interacting with their stakeholders and keeping their project on track? Well, let's look at a client-centric constraint case. If your client has regular and significant change requests that impact scope or make requests that do not sync with each other, what would you do? You might try one of the following options. A, ask the client for a new project scope review. Check that the scope is correct as a whole. If you start tweaking things here and there, pretty soon your product can become a Frankenstein, not useful to anyone. So at times, it's best to say, let's stop for a minute and just check our overall scope again. B, you can set up a change control committee made up of users, technical and functional team members who can assess the change requests in light of the overall scope and the goal for the final product. This change committee can actually become a neutral ability for your project to address those kind of change requests and actually give feedback to the client that they'll listen to better because it's really taken on board from multiple points of view. And so you can discuss freezing the work with your client. In other words, just doing the work already scoped, going through testing, and then assessing whether that change requirement is actually still needed for the current scope of the project. One of these options may be useful to keep the client happy and the work on track. And if you're managing a complex project, a big project with lots of moving parts, you may need something even more robust. A model that helps you look at all of the points you're juggling. And that could be the dynamic constraint hexagon. This constraint model focuses on changes that are more likely to happen in large projects. So let's talk about a case study for that. Let's assume you have technical staff that are rolling off the project unexpectedly, and you can only find an inexperienced staff to replace them. This is happening at the same time as an upgrade to the technology you're working on. That's bad news. These combined changes will increase project risk, resources, costs, and planning. Planning for so many changes at once could derail your project. You might try one of the following options in that case. A, try to retain the current staff during the upgrade, and that may mean a cost bump because you'll have to give them a bonus. B, hire a more seasoned staff member if you can, even if it's only for the short term. And that will help you replace like for that outgoing staff. C is delay the upgrade. Take the technical aspect out of the project planning. And the fact is, when you're dealing with a multi-layer project, there are so many options, so many choices, and it really is up to the project manager to figure out which lever to pull. The best constraint model is the one that fits your project. So consider these three models, figure out which one serves you best. The simpler the better is generally the rule. And if you want to know more about constraint models, download these models or get some of my free deliverables, go to my blog, the link is below. Now, if you found this information helpful, I hope you'll give it a like. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing and share this information with others. We need to get the word out so everyone can get better at their job. I'd like to give you 2 videos to start. One is my project management series playlist that can give you all of the information I've already published to date. And I'll start you here with the project management workbook, which is a way to help you understand some of the background of things I've talked about today. And I hope to see you next time on projectskillmentor.com. Bye-bye, everybody.